Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 682 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. It is Monday, January 13th, 2025. I'm not even going to attempt to call this a bites because we have a few different things we want to talk about, and of course, a big preview for a game that, of course, I know a lot about. I am Donald Wine. I am your host for this episode. I have Jason Evans with me. Jason, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. I am 100% with you on us not calling this a bites because it's kind of weird how these sometimes an episode will happen like this. There's a lot of stuff to cover here, and
Well,
people don't know about all of it. But it's interesting. It's good stuff.
there's stuff that popped up, right? We had the main meat of what we were going to talk about, and then
Right.
naturally other things happened on the way to the Circle K. Before we get into everything, Jason, programming note, we were talking about this morning. The Boston College game, which is on Saturday, has been set. It had a TBA time at this point. ESPN had to set where they wanted to put it in their Saturday lineup. They have set it for 8 p.m. Eastern time on ESPN. So mark your calendars there. That makes my schedule on Saturday very dumb because there's a big game going on the football side of things for me on Saturday at 8 o'clock. Don't worry, I will watch the game at some point, but there's going to be a lot going on Saturday after Saturday evening.
Yeah, and I strongly suspect that what we are seeing from ESPN here is the Cooper Flagg effect, which, as you recall, happened when we had the Zion Williamson effect as well. This was Duke BC. This would ordinarily be a game that my bet is they would maybe have relegated to the ACC network or ESPN2, something like that. And suddenly, Cooper Flagg had the dunk of the year. Suddenly, Cooper Flagg had 42 points and set an all-time ACC freshman record. And ESPN went, "Oh, let's put that game in prime time, baby."
I will say the game was set to be at either 4 o'clock or 8 o'clock. That was what they had on the calendar weeks ago.
Right.
So they kind of anticipated it's going to be in one of these time blocks, and yeah, sure, put it at 8 o'clock. It just affects everybody. Nobody is affected by about this, but me and other Duke fans who are also fans of the Detroit Lions, or I guess the Washington Commanders. Now, having said that, we're going to get to the basketball side. I think before we get to what we're here for, the Miami preview, we need to talk about obviously a big thing that happened against Notre Dame that will affect Duke for the next quote several weeks, and that is Malik Brown. Of course, he was injured in that game. He played less than a minute before he kind of got injured by a freak accident fall by Mason Gillis. Kind of ran into him. Didn't feel at the time that it was serious, but of course, as we noted in our recap of that game, Jon Scheyer in his post-game press conference said that it probably was serious and that he was worried about the long-term prognosis of Malik Brown. Well, it has been confirmed that he will miss several games, which over the course of several weeks, if not longer, with a sprained knee. And the quote from Brendan Marks on Twitter posted a quote from Jon Scheyer. I guess it was in his weekly coaches press conference. And he says, quote, he'll miss an extended period of time here. He's going to be out for the next several games minimum. So, Jason, I think that's obviously a big deal. We talked about how much our defensive shape relies on the deflections that Malik Brown has, and now it is a chance for, as we kind of talked about with Jordan Brenner when he was on the show a couple of episodes back. Pat Ngongba, Mason Gillis is going to be these guys' time to likely step up to help with that, the interior defense, but also Jason, the defensive shape is going to change somewhat. Obviously, Gongba is not a guy who's known for deflections. He's mainly known as more of a guy who could stand tall in the paint. Obviously, we have Kama Malawach, who's known for his blocking skills, but Mason Gill, or I'm sorry, not Mason Gills. Malik Brown was known for his defensive skills in stealing balls and getting deflections and getting the ball and going the other way. And we were so great at that. He had double the deflections of the second person on the team, Cooper Flagg. So, Jason, very quickly, your thoughts on Malik Brown being out for what seems to be an extended period of time.
So I'll say there are a couple things about this. The first one is I think it is no coincidence that Duke had one of their, if not their worst defensive games of the year in the game against Notre Dame with Malik Brown, only playing 45 seconds, 50 seconds, whatever it was. He is that impactful on defense. And I was just looking ahead at the schedule. Look, not that there's any game that I wouldn't want to have Malik Brown for, but I'm really looking at. I've circled through that February 8th date at Clemson, one of the most toughest, if not the toughest games left on Duke's schedule. And Clemson is a team that has some really nice big men in Ian Shefflin. They've got Victor Larkin. This is a Clemson team that can roll out some fairly big guys. And they've got Chauncey Wiggins, that's right, as well, coming off the bench. They've got some good bigs, and I feel like that is a game where we could really use someone like Malik Brown. So that's the date I've sort of circled to say I really, really hope we can get him back by then. I also want to address one other thing, which is that in the meantime, Duke will absolutely have to adjust the way we play defense because Malik Brown allowed us to switch five, 1 through 5. And we were, as we mentioned on the last podcast, we were beginning to do a little bit of that with man as well. We didn't do it against Notre Dame. Notre Dame has Marcus Burton's incredibly fast. Just that switch was going to be a very difficult one for Duke. But I think that you would have seen Duke try and do it more and more with man against the right kind of opponents. And we'll talk about Miami. Miami might be one of those opponents. We're just not going to be able to do that with Big Pat, with Patrick Gongba in the game. He is not. I can tell you, there's no way he's prepared to switch 1 through 5. So Duke sort of has to look at what rotations make sense, what defense makes sense for them, and I actually think you're going to see Patrick Gongba get some minutes like in the first half. I could see like him getting a little 3, 4, maybe 5 minute run. But I don't think you're going to see him a lot in the second half. I think what this injury means is more time for Mason Gillis. It probably means more time for man and also more time for Cooper Flagg, although I'm not sure how much Cooper can possibly play. But
Right, he's already playing 37.
yeah, I don't really see, if Mason Gillis, I'm sorry, if Malik Brown was in the 15, 18, 20 minute kind of range, I don't think you're going to see Patrick Gongba. You're not going to see him up at 8, 10 minutes a game in a really, really competitive ACC contest.
Yeah, you got to replace what Malik Brown brings to the table in the aggregate. And as I've always said on this show, Jason, and in life, stay ready so you ain't got to get ready. And Patrick Gongba, it's time for you to be ready. So hopefully he steps up against Miami. Jason, before we get into the Miami preview, there's another thing. We want to go back a little bit to the Notre Dame game because when Cooper Flagg does 42 points, you kind of have to talk about it a little bit more and how it reflects on the team building and how the roster construction, everything that we talked about in the preseason has kind of built its way up to this moment. So I know you have some stuff on that, so take it away.
Like all of you, I continue to dwell on the incredible game that Cooper Flagg had against Notre Dame, where he scored 42 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists, or whatever. I mean, the numbers were just jumped off the page at you. And I was looking at the post-game comments from Micah Shrewsbury, the Notre Dame head coach, a fine coach who I think is doing a really, really nice job with Notre Dame. And here's one of the things that he had to say that really stuck out to me. He said that Duke has the right mix of players around Cooper Flagg. He said if they had him and they didn't have shooting, or they had people that needed the ball and were ball dominant, it probably wouldn't work. Now, when Micah Shrewsbury said that, it made me think for a moment. I want you all to think about 2 controversial, unexpected moves that happened for Duke in the offseason. First of all, they effectively told the ball-dominant Jeremy Roach that it probably would be best if he went elsewhere. Next, over the summer, they moved the ball-dominant Tyrese Proctor to the wing, taking him from being a point guard into a designated shooter, a shooting guard. Now, these moves really freed up Cooper Flagg to run the show on offense at Duke. Sure, look, I know Sion James, Caleb Foster are the point guards, but neither of them are anywhere close to the ball stoppers and ball dominant kind of players that Jeremy Roach was, and to a lesser extent Tyrese Proctor was. If anything, Duke treats Con Knipple like our secondary ball handler, and he has great ball instincts and movement. But if you close your eyes, just take a second and think about how different this team would look on offense if Jeremy Roach was out there, somehow sharing the ball with Cooper and Con. Now, open your eyes. You're probably going to puke all over the floor at how ugly and frustrating that would be. No offense to Jeremy Roach, but it just doesn't work. And close your eyes again and try to picture what it'd be like if every possession began with Tyrese Proctor at point guard trying to get things started. It's just a dramatically different type of offense, and it probably mutes a little bit of Cooper Flagg's genius. Jon Scheyer wanted Cooper Flagg. He watched Cooper Flagg carry that under-talented Maine United team to unbelievable heights playing AAU basketball. And that team played Cooper Flagg functionally as their point guard, even though he was bigger than anyone else on the floor, playing AAU ball, elite AAU ball. And Jon Scheyer saw what Cooper Flagg did as a facilitator and as an initiator, and Scheyer cleared the decks so that this could be Cooper's role at Duke. I am willing to bet that a good bit of Duke's pitch to Cooper Flagg when they were recruiting him was saying, this is the way we're going to have you play. And remember, Donald, how excited we got in the preseason when we saw Cooper Flagg working out with the guards, not with the forwards and the centers?
Mm-hmm.
Jon Scheyer recognized, even though we knew that Cooper would ostensibly be functioning like a forward, especially on defense, Jon Scheyer recognized this guy needs to work out with the guards because this guy is going to be my main initiator of the offense. And it has worked out quite beautifully so far. And my last word on this is when you start hearing people talk about coach of the year across college basketball this year, you're going to hear them talk about like the coach of Iowa State and Auburn. You can hear a lot of names tossed out there. Marquette, certainly. You're not going to hear very many people at all talk about Jon Scheyer and Duke. I don't think. Maybe it's by the end of the year, if we run the table from here, which is not impossible, and Duke only has 2 losses in the season, you'll probably hear Scheyer getting some attention at that point. But I'm telling you right now, today, if you were voting for Coach of the Year, Jon Scheyer needs heavy, heavy consideration because he has designed this team around the talents of a basketball savant in a way that was controversial and was not expected, and it has worked out beautifully so far.
I want to couple some of the words that you say because I agree with what you're saying and how this roster is constructed and how it was kind of created and the type of personnel that is required to have a Cooper Flagg on your team. When you say the words, and not just you, but anyone out there says the words ball dominant, ball stopper, that is not a bad thing. That is just
right. I don't mean to be criticized. I agree. I don't mean to be
that is not a
criticizing them.
criticism. That is a very different thing. For example, Caden Boozer coming in can be considered a ball dominant point guard, and we are going to have him and Cameron kind of, construct the offense around them. But what that means is you you basically have Cooper Flagg operating like a LeBron James, in the sense that he's not necessarily bringing
Exactly.
the ball up all the time, but there's going to be moments where you say, "Hey, give the horse the ball and get out of the way." And in the NBA, it's more of a get out of the way, but at least in Cooper Flagg's part, you have a 6'9" guy who can pass over any defense that he's a part of, that he sees. And the, king of all he surveys, that sort of thing, he can see the whole court. And the fact that he's already operating 2, 3 moves ahead of everybody else, it feels like that helps. And so to have that, you kind of have to get rid of the personnel, not necessarily get rid of the personnel, but get rid of the idea that you need a ball dominant point guard, uh, in that sense, because Cooper Flagg is going to have times where he needs to be the guy with the ball coming up the floor, or at least very early on in the offense. So I really liked what they did. It is not the saying goodbye to Jeremy Roach, and we, I mean, you and I, he's one of our best players, like he's one of our favorite players. So this is not like a diss on, him leaving, but it's more about what we had coming in and what needed to happen to make this team the best it can be. And we've seen the results so far. Of course, we want that to continue, but this process started in April. Where we're at right now started in April with the construction of this roster. We've talked about the pieces that we've acquired, not just through recruiting, but through the transfer portal, how some of these guys who are staying, how they were made to do different things. You mentioned Tyrese Proctor. I don't even know what Tyrese Proctor was doing was more controversial, but it definitely was a change to what we have seen him do. And that was something that we as fans had to kind of wrap our head around as well. That's the idea here. It's not just these players, but when we see Tyrese Proctor off the ball, we're kind of like, yo, why does he, we're getting the ball taken from us. Why don't we have Tyrese Proctor move the point? We heard that so many times after those losses to Kansas, after the loss to Kentucky, and we stuck the course. So here we are. And so now everyone has a role. They understand what it is, and everyone is moved around. And it's not just that this offense is built around one person, it's that one person builds his game around the rest of his team. And that is the key here. You can build your offense around a guy, but if it's just going to be a black hole of basketball, then it doesn't matter. Cooper Flagg is not that. Cooper Flagg obviously is leading the team in every statistical category, positive one that exists. And there's a reason for that. It's because it's set up for him to help everyone else succeed as a team. And that's why we've seen the success we've had so far, Jason. So I really, really appreciate you bringing that perspective to this show, and also just to, again, wrap in our minds that, hey, with some of the guys that we really, really enjoyed, this team would still look a lot different, and not necessarily in a bad way, but it just would be a much different basketball team than we're seeing right now.
Yeah, no question about it. And again, part of my point in this was to talk about how Duke has constructed the roster, but part of it is to sing the praises of the head coach, Jon Scheyer. And I just don't think he gets enough credit for what he's doing with this Duke team. Again, go back and listen to the episode just a few days ago with Jordan Brenner, and we talk about what impressive things Jon Scheyer is doing in terms of coaching the offense on this team and the defense on this team. He's really doing a fabulous job.
Yeah, Jon Scheyer, the whole coaching staff, they too have to be on their A game every single night, not
Yep.
just the players. And yeah, there's some times where they make mistakes and we call them out, but this part, yeah, we're very, very happy with what's been transpiring so far this season. Jason, let's get to the game that we're here for. My alma mater, my law school alma mater, the Miami Hurricanes, come to town tomorrow night, Tuesday. This team, Jason Evans, is not good.
You
And
think?
unfortunately, I have had to watch a lot of Miami Hurricanes basketball. I guess I don't have to, but I do because I support my schools. But the Miami Hurricanes, they come in at 4-12. They are 0-5 in the ACC. They are 139th in KenPom, 207th in the net. Let me tell you about the Miami Hurricanes this season. This part a little bit. It usually this part of who they've played is very quick. But this one's going to be a little bit longer because there is a key bit of information that separates this team from everybody else. So they have wins over Fairleigh Dickinson, Binghamton, and Coppin State. They had three straight to start the year. And then they went on a 7-game losing streak, and it just felt like they lost the plot. There were some close games that they lost. Arkansas, they were ahead literally the whole game until the last like 40 seconds of the game, and then they lost. But they lost to Drake, Oklahoma State, VCU, Charleston Southern, Arkansas, Clemson, and Tennessee. Some of those teams, very, very good. But then they came back. They beat Presbyterian after that game to Tennessee, where they lost Nigel Pack, and we'll talk about Nigel Pack's absence a little bit later. But they lost Nigel Pack to a foot injury. He's been out since then. And that Presbyterian game, which was on December 15th, is the last time Miami was in the win column. They are currently on a 5-game losing streak, losing to Mount St. Mary's, Boston College, Virginia Tech, Florida State, and Wake. Now, the big piece of this is that, of course, we talked about it on the show when it happened, but Jim Larrañaga resigned as head coach on December 26th. Miami was 4-8 at the time, and it was quite unexpected that he would resign at this point. They had been talking about whether this would be his last season in Miami, just because it felt like he, was kind of tired. But 2 years removed from being in the Final Four, he decided he was going to leave at this point. Now, the interim coach is Bill Courtney. He's been at the U for 6 seasons. He took over December 26th. He has been there for 3 seasons as an assistant coach, and then the past 3 seasons as the associate head coach. He's been on Jim Larrañaga's staff, for 6 years, but also was on his staff at Bowling Green and George Mason back in the day. He has some head coaching experience, and he has head coaching experience in Cameron. He coached Cornell from 2010 to 2016. Cornell played Duke in December 2013 in Cameron. That was a Duke win, 88-47. That was a game where Seth Curry had 20 points. He also has stops at American, Providence, UVA, Virginia Tech, and DePaul. So he's well respected. He's well liked. He's native of Alexandria, Virginia, so right down the road from here. And the hope was that he could help reinvigorate the squad and kind of get them back on track, but that has not yet been the case. They are 0-4 since he took over. In 2 of their games, they started out up big and let the team come back in and just kind of blitz them. Against Boston College, they were up 27-9. They ended up losing by 10. Virginia Tech, they were up for a lot of the game, and they were even up 4 points with a minute 12 left, and then they lose 86-85. So they're really in a rut. They have not played well, and most importantly, they have not played well as a team. This is the first of 2 times we'll see Miami in the regular season. And this is, in my opinion, Jason, this is just a game we have to win. Like, establish dominance, never let a team that is in a rut get out of the rut against you. But this is a team so far that has just not been able to get anything right. So I lead it to you. I know you have some notes on the offense and the defense. So why don't we start there? Let's start with the offense because their offense is way better than their defense, as you're about to say.
Yeah, exactly. If I may, if you don't mind, before I get to the
Please.
offense, I just want to highlight a couple things about their schedule. I want to drive home some of what you were talking about.
Hmm.
First of all, there were a whole bunch of teams you mentioned. They've lost 12 of 13. There are a whole bunch of teams you mentioned in that 12-game losing streak. But folks need to understand, like Charleston Southern, we're talking about a team that's number 288 in Ken Pomeroy. Charleston Southern lost to Georgia Tech by 25. They've lost a number of games by like 20, 30 plus points. They they are just 5-13, Charleston Southern on the season. 5-13. And one of their wins is over Miami. Mount St. Mary's, who they lost to, is number 219 in Ken Pom. Mount St. Mary's lost by more than 30 points to Maryland. They lost by almost 30 points to Georgetown. These are teams that are not competitive with power conference teams, and they beat Miami. So you mentioned that Miami's currently 139 in Ken Pom. They started the year around, oh boy, Cameron's loud back there. You hear Cameron?
Oh, there he is. Hey, what's up, Cam?
We got a guy doing some work on our furnace here, making sure we're nice and warm. And Cameron is telling that gentleman to
Cameron
hold on
said
right
no.
now.
Cameron said no warmth for anybody.
Exactly. I can't fight this. I'm just going to go through it as he keeps doing it.
Go ahead.
So, like you said, they're currently 139 in Ken Pom. They started the year right around number 50. So that is a big old drop that they've experienced over the course of this season. It is really interesting that their record is as bad as it is because, like you said, they've lost a lot of close games. They're 0-9 in games decided by 10 points or less, 0-4 in games decided by 4 points or less. I mean, a lucky bounce or two or three or four, and they could be like 8-8 or so, which isn't nearly as jarring as like the four and what is it, 4-12, 4-13,
4-12, yeah.
4-12, yeah. So I mean, they they're a little bit better than that record, but they're still they're still terrible. All right, now let's get to what I'm really here for, which is looking at the advanced metrics. And you're right, they're a decent offensive team. They're 49th in Ken Pom on offense. Really good at hitting 2-point field goals. 58, better than 58% on their 2-point field goals. That's good for 18th best in Division One. They're not as good as hitting three-pointers, only about 32% from the three-point line. They're also a good free throw shooting team, better than 77%, almost 77, almost 78%. Though they don't shoot a lot of free throws. They're not a team that gets to the free throw line a tremendous amount. They're 297th, almost 300th in free throw rate. They are fairly decent at not turning the ball over. They're more of a, and you would know this better than I do, but it looks like they're more of a one-on-one team than a passing team. Their
Yes.
assist percentage is really poor, 288th in assist percentage. It's like, if you're a Miami guy, you either score on your own because you ain't getting it back if you throw it to a teammate, apparently. As we said, pretty good on offense. They are a train wreck, train wreck, train wreck on defense. I mean, it is atrocious. 308th in Ken Pom on defensive efficiency. Newsflash, that's the worst in the ACC. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's the worst of any power conference team. 308th. Teams like Army, Maine, Wofford, teams that Duke beat the absolute pants off of, they are way better on defense than Miami is. And if you want to know why they're really bad on defense, it's simple. Miami doesn't turn teams over and they allow teams to shoot really well. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? I mean, this team is 302nd in the nation in turnover percentage. They're like 364 teams. They're 302nd in turnover percentage. Basically, they don't get any turnovers. No steals, no double dribbles, no nothing. Miami just does not get turnovers. And they allow teams to hit almost 54% of their 2-point field goals. And here's the outrageous number. Teams hit 37.5% of their 3-point field goals. Everyone that plays Miami shoots lights out from the perimeter against them. They are, ready for the number, 341st in the country at 3-point field goal defense. That is bad. Now, they do a fairly good job of not fouling a lot, but maybe they should foul more because they clearly are not stopping teams from making baskets. But maybe you should try fouling and see if you can put people at the free throw line because you're not stopping teams from hitting twos and you're really not stopping them from hitting threes. It's worth noting that they are a fairly decent defensive rebounding team. They don't get a lot of offensive rebounds, but they do a decent job of getting defensive rebounds. Again, they're not guarding anybody, so I guess they might as well bother to get rebounds when teams occasionally miss against them. And there's one last really strange. This is just one of the most bizarre stats, and it's not something that would be intuitive. So I mentioned they're atrocious. They're terrible on defense, but they play really. Their pace of play is really slow on defense. Like one of the bottom 50 slowest paces of play on defense. That doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense because usually teams that are playing slow on defense are forcing teams deep in the shot clock. You know, like Duke is super slow on defense because teams can't find a shot they want, and they end up taking a desperation shot late in the shot clock. We saw Notre Dame do that again and again. It is super rare to see a team be in, the 300s in defensive efficiency as Miami is, and also in the 300s in defensive pace. It's almost like, and I don't know if this is true, but it's almost like Miami plays really good defense for about 20 seconds, and then they just kind of go, take whatever shot you want now at the end. It's just one of the strangest stats I've ever seen that a team can be bad on defense and also play really slow on defense. I don't get it.
Ready for me to explain it? Here it is.
Yes.
So what happens is they don't really, in a lot of their games, especially when they're in a rut, they are terrible at defensive rotations. And so it's, as a team, if you're on offense and you're facing Miami, a lot of teams just kind of wait for them to kind of get out of pocket in enough time where they could get a good pass. Now, here's the other thing. They do get a couple of steals. The reason why they do is because they cheat on those long passes, those skip passes. They love to cheat on those. And so as long as you don't telegraph those passes, you're going to be able to get the ball to the spots you want. But that takes a couple of seconds because when they cheat for a pass, the last thing that they're worried about is, getting back into their defensive set. At that point, they're kind of all over the place. You kind of see some guys guarding. You get a lot of, mismatches, and that is where teams strike. So yes, some teams decide, hey, let's wait a couple seconds and kind of wait for Miami to get into a situation where they don't have the right defensive set that they want, and then we strike. And so you see that a lot of times, and it's not necessarily all Miami. And yes, there's definitely times where they have some really good possessions and they work hard and get the rebound and go. But a lot of times they just feel like out of sorts. And when they get out of sorts, you just have to wait for them to get those pieces in the right spot for you, and then you strike.
Well, that's all I got on them statistically. I know I'm glad you explained that to me. It makes a lot of sense that, over the course of a few passes, suddenly Miami's defense completely breaks down. That would explain the weird statistical anomaly. But I don't know. It's shocking to see an ACC team, especially an ACC team that has some talented players, be this bad on defense. It kind of makes no sense.
It really does. But you know what? Let's focus on the players on the other side of this break. Also, on the other side of this break, we will get into some of the things that Miami does and what they need to do, and what Duke needs to do to get a W. But also, we're going to talk about Coach K and his comments about a particular basketball mega conference that he would like to see. We'll talk about it after this.
All right, Duke fans, from the football playoffs to college and pro basketball to the rush of hockey, it is all happening this winter, and you can get in on all the action of the sports you love at DraftKings Sportsbook.
Lots of sports, Jason. My TV stays glued to just about every sporting event possible. And now with some of these games we watch, we can have a little more of a rooting interest. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. So go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your picks as the sports action picks up in the new year.
Make every day game day with DraftKings Sportsbooks. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use this code, DukeBB. That code again, DukeBB, for new customers to get a $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. DraftKings, the crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio.
Are you trying to spice up your love life with your partner this winter? You know what I'm talking about. Well, Joy Mode is here to help you give that extra boost when the lights go out and that fire inside burns bright.
Joy Mode features just 4 simple, proven ingredients. No prescriptions, no doctor's visits, and a straightforward, effective solution. Simply mix the packs with water and feel the effects within 45 minutes. But it's not just about the love life. Daily use of Joy Mode boosts heart health and can help you in the gym or on the basketball court.
So, if you're looking to take your game to the next level, visit tryjoymode.com and use code DukeBB at checkout for 20% off single purchases and 30% off subscription orders. That's tryjoymode.com and use the code DukeBB for 20% off single purchases and 30% off subscription orders. Take control with Joy Mode. All right, we are back, and Jason, we're going to shift our attention to the Miami players, and I think you've looked a little bit at them, but let me give you a little breakdown of what I've seen from
baby.
Miami thus far, because I will say this, there has been a lot of rotations, and you kind of have to take the first, the end of the Jim Larrañaga era out of the equation, because you kind of have to focus on what Bill Courtney has done in these first 4 years, and he's really shuffled the lineup around in an effort to try and get a combination that works. And so far, he has kind of opted for, first of all, he's had to opt for a couple of guys that were not in the lineup before Larrañaga retired. But I will say the one guy he wishes was in the lineup, but will probably not be, is Nigel Pack. He's the 2-year transfer from Kansas State. He suffered a foot injury, as I mentioned, against Tennessee back on December 12th. Has not played since. He's been in a walking boot the whole time. He's not expected to be back anytime soon. But he is a really big miss, because he's that guy who was straight from the logo, right? He could shoot from anywhere in the gym and would absolutely try to. He was one of their long bombers from beyond the arc. In his first 4 games as the interim head coach, he's kind of gone with this lineup with the exception of the very last game. Jalil Bethea, Divine Ugochukwu, Matthew Cleveland, Brandon Johnson, and Lynn Kidd. Now, Austin Swartz started the last game in place of Ugochukwu because Ugochukwu suffered a hip injury in the loss to Florida State, and his status for this game is unclear. But let's focus on a couple of guys that I think should be familiar to Duke fans. First of all, Matthew Cleveland. Jason, I want to give you the stat about Matthew Cleveland that I saw from Connor O'Neill on Twitter, who is very great and had this stat. Teams with Matthew Cleveland on the roster are combined 45 and 65. In 2 years at Florida State, he was 17 and 14. And that was his only winning season. He was 9 and 23. He then transferred to Miami, and in 2 years he is 15 and 17, and now 4 and 12. So it is not because Matthew Cleveland is this terrible player. He's actually one of the better players on this team. 13.5 points per game, averages almost close to 5 rebounds a game. Just is one of the guys. He's the main guy that they're going to try and look at to try and get them a bucket. Lynn Kidd is a transfer. He's a 6'10 transfer from Virginia Tech. He also played at Clemson his freshman year. He's the guy inside. And when he is on, Miami looks a lot better. He's had a couple of double-double games. I think he has 4 or 5 double-doubles this season. He has a couple of games where he's over 20 points. But when he disappears, so does Miami, because they just don't have an interior presence when he is not on his game. Jalil Bethea, this is the guy that has just recently moved into the starting lineup. He was number 10 in the class, the recruiting class. He's a freshman, according to ESPN. He was a McDonald's All-American. He played with Cooper Flagg and Isaiah Evans in that game on the East roster, and has just not panned out so far in his career at Miami. But he is starting to enter the lineup, and so you're going to see him play a lot more. I feel like Bill Courtney is giving him the keys a lot more and telling him, "Hey, go be you, be who be who we recruited, and bring your game up to that level." So you'll see a lot of Jalil Bethea there. He is not going to be the one that really brings up the ball. That's going to be if Divine Oguchukwu is in the game, he's going to bring up the ball quite a bit. But you'll see them kind of like us, right? You're not going to see one primary ball handler is not a ball dominant guy. There's a lot of guys that are going to try and bring the ball up, Matthew Cleveland included. And it's the idea is to get these guys in positions where they're going to try and get inside and go. Like Ugochukwu does not shoot threes. I think he's 1 for 7 on the year from threes, even though he's a 6'3" guard. He's not going to be outside. A lot of these guys want to get into the paint, which is a Miami staple. Coach L guys, they shoot some threes, but they don't really shoot a lot of them. They just want to get into the paint and make their presence known there. So, especially for our big guys, we need to make sure we're ready for guys to kind of attack the paint. One guy who can shoot the three is Austin Schwartz. He's their 6'4" freshman. He was a top 50 recruit in the class. He started the game on Saturday against Wake and could be expected to start again tomorrow night if Ugochukwu is not ready to go. But he's a guy, again, did not start out well, and Bill Courtney's kind of given him more of a role in this offense. So you see a lot of him in this offense. Now, we good? Okay. Now, there's a couple other guys that are not really in the starting lineup, and there's guys who were in the starting lineup to begin the season that are kind of not anymore. Paul Jobay, you'll see a lot of him. He averages 5.1 points per game, but he's the lone guy that was on last year's team that was not a transfer. So he's the lone guy that kind of from a recruiting class that Coach L has kind of kept along. And you have AJ Stanton McCrary, who is also a guy who will shoot threes. He doesn't shoot them as well. He's a transfer from Sanford, but like you said, there's a lot of guys who, when they get to the line, can knock down free throws. That is Stanton McCrary. He shoots 85% from the line. So you have a lot of guys who can shoot, and they look to get to the lane because they know that if they get fouled, they can knock down buckets. So the idea is to try and defend the interior without fouling. Finally, I think when you go back to Matthew Cleveland, he's kind of the engine that makes everything go. And when he has a good game, Miami has a good game. When he doesn't, Miami struggles hard. So with Matthew Cleveland, this is a guy who, like we said, we have been familiar with him for 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
Both at Florida State and at Miami. And he's a guy that, he didn't play last year. He was injured when Duke played Miami last year. So I know he wants to get some payback. He wants to kind of get in the game, and he's going to try to insert himself very quickly. But all these guys, they need to have a boost. They need to have some sort of pick-me-up. The Miami is looking at this game as hopefully the start of the boost of their season. It's upon Duke to stop that. It's upon Duke to kind of keep them in the rut that they've been in all season long, and especially over these last, 13 games where they just haven't really found a way to play together as a team. They cannot give them any momentum to do that.
All right, I want to give you a couple other player and kind of matchup notes, things that I've just sort of, noticed about some of these guys that I think is worth mentioning. You mentioned that they're trying to give Jalil Bethea a little more freedom. It is worth noting that he is widely considered the best freshman recruit in Miami history, modern history, I should say.
Yeah.
Miami recruited Rick Barry many years ago. Rick Barry's
He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah. Although I don't know, Rick Barry was, I think he was a very good I don't know what his high school reputation necessarily was. Although I know he was pretty valued, but we don't have 247 or anybody else, ESPN's rankings from the 1960s.
Yeah.
So it's unsure, but Jalil Bethea is an incredibly talented player. And it's been very surprising that he hasn't been. I mean, like, this is a guy who's considered way better than Khan Knipple and Kaman Malawach and even Ian
Ranked
Jack.
higher than Isaiah Evans. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of these guys who are having a big impact on the ACC and across the country. And he's had a fairly muted impact so far. And so it's really, I think it's important for Miami to try to let him cook and let him see if he can be nearly the player that they expected him to be coming into school. I also wanted to mention Matthew Cleveland. Dude, I remember when he was a freshman at Florida State, there was one and done talk about him. He had one
Hmm.
and done kind of athleticism and like a body that you went, I can see how that translates to the NBA. And it's just never really happened for him nearly the way anyone expected it would. It's frankly kind of surprising because I remember vividly watching him as a freshman and thinking, oh, I can see how some of this stuff, he's going to get just a little better at this and that, and he's going to be there. And it's just never happened for him. Um, in terms of matchups, I think one of the most interesting ones is Lynn Kidd versus Man Man in the middle. People should know Lynn Kidd, super experienced guy, been all over the ACC. In his 5th year in the ACC now, he was a 4-star top 100 recruit when he arrived at Clemson in 2020. Barely played, like didn't play hardly at all for the Tigers. He transferred then to Virginia Tech, barely played, didn't play hardly at all for the Hokies. In his first 2 seasons, I want folks to understand this, first 2 years of playing ACC basketball, he played a grand total of 56 minutes. Christian Reeves is like, dude, you ain't getting much playing time.
Hmm.
I mean, like, let's put it in perspective. He was a deep, deep bench warmer. But rather than transferring again when he was at Virginia Tech, he really worked on his game and turned into a pretty solid player for them the past couple years. And then he went to Miami this year for his last season of eligibility. I think it's his last season. Who can keep up nowadays? I know he's been around for 5 years. Apparently, some guys get like 7 years. I don't know. Anyway, I think Lynn Kidd's all done after this year. But look, he's no Norchad Omier. That's whose place he kind of took on the Miami roster. Not nearly the same kind of player, but he is big, he is long, he is strong, and he will try to push Man Man off his spot. I am sure that Miami is aware of how much Duke has been looking more and more and more to Man Man lately. I'm sure they're also aware that he's hitting almost like 84% of his shots from the field, which we have marveled at. It will be Lynn Kidd's job to try and prevent Man Man from having another, 6 for 6, 7 for 8 kind of game. And that's a real interesting matchup. The other one is, no duh, who guards Cooper Flagg? That
Right.
is a huge question for this Miami team. I think the guy who's best suited for it is Matthew Cleveland, who's experienced. He has the right kind of size. He has a physical, strong body. So I feel like, and he has pretty decent foot speed and athleticism. He could do a pretty good job on it. The problem is, if you do that, who does Brandon Johnson cover? I mean, like, do you put him on Con Knipple? You're not going to put him on Tyrese Proctor. It creates this sort of problem in terms of, how Miami matches up their other guys, which is why I wonder, and again, Donald, you know them way better than I do. I wonder if you may see Miami play a good bit of zone against Duke. We saw Notre Dame go to a zone, and I don't want to say that it flummoxed Duke, but Duke didn't do that great against the zone. I wonder if more and more teams are going to be like, we can't play Cooper one-on-one. No one in the cut up there. I don't know.
Very few
There's
can,
not,
yeah.
yeah, there are not many guys in the country who can play Cooper one-on-one. So teams may go, let's go zone and just dare this team to shoot over us. Maybe they'll hit them, but maybe they won't. And the formula for beating Duke may be don't play man to man, play zone, and just see where the chips fall in terms of Duke's outside shooting. And then the last thing I wanted to mention really quickly, the other formula for beating Duke, other than I think maybe playing zone, is to hit your 3-pointers. That's what Notre Dame did. And the problem Miami has is I looked on their roster. I don't see anyone on this roster who's like a bombs away kind of guy who can carry them. They don't have a single player who has attempted even 73 pointers on the season. Now, I know part of that is because Nigel Pack is injured. Nigel Pack would be up there. He's a bomber, but he's not playing for them right now. And like I said, no one on that roster has attempted even 73s on the year. Both Tyrese Proctor and Con Knipple are close to 100 threes for Duke. So put it in some perspective there. Duke has numerous guys who are perfectly willing to fire away. Miami, it just doesn't feel to me like there's a guy on Miami who goes, yes, if we need someone to take 8 threes in this game, I'm your man. And I think that's a problem for them because I think, again, formula for staying with Duke, if you're not a really talented team, is zone them and hope that they don't hit their threes and hit your own threes because the Duke defense isn't going to let you get a good shot inside the line.
I'm glad you mentioned the 3-point shooting for them because in their wins, yes, they actually shoot very well from 3 for the most part. They also, in those games, have over 15 assists. One thing that they do not do well is pass the ball around. When they are passing the ball well, they have more of those open looks and they knocked down a few of those threes. They have games in some of their losses where they shot less than 20% from three and had less than 5 assists. Like 5 assists in the game is nothing. Like Cooper Flagg does that before the first TV timeout in some games, right? Like that is not a lot of passing the ball around. It's a lot of hero ball. And again, if they pass the ball around, they're a much better team. I will say, Jason, as we end our preview of the Miami game, there is one person that is not going to play tomorrow, most likely, that you need to look out for. And he's a name who will ring a bell with Duke fans, and his name is Xander Allery. He's the son of Mark Allery, who is also from right here in the DMV. He played
I love
ball
it.
at St. Andrews Episcopal. He looks just like his dad. I met him at a Duke DC event. Mark and I were on the Duke DC board for several years when I first moved here. So I met Xander at a Duke event, and he was like 3 or 4. He was not 6'8" then, but he is 6'8" now. He will be on the bench, but also will be back in Cameron for another time. Again, not with his dad, but really to watch. His dad might be there to watch him play for Miami. So I think that's pretty cool. Again, 9 p.m. Eastern time, ESPN. That will be that game. It's a late one, so make sure you get your coffee in tomorrow afternoon. Now, we're going to end with one bit of news that we think is kind of interesting, and that is from Coach K. On his show, on a SiriusXM show, he had Chris Patola, his son-in-law, who's also an ESPN color broadcaster analyst. He had him on, and he was discussing how to make the ACC basketball better, and how to make it where the ACC can kind of thrive in this football-focused world. And he has a great suggestion. That suggestion is maybe combine with the Big East. I don't know. Actually, Coach K, why don't you say what you have to say? Here's from Coach K.
The two conferences, power conferences that are ahead are the SEC and the Big Ten. And so our conference has been a great one. I think it needs to get better. We're down result-wise in both men's basketball and in football, at least the bowl games. And I'd like to see something innovative, like I'd like to see the ACC and the Big East talk and form a mega basketball conference. People are talking about a mega football conference eventually. Imagine if we had the Big East, and you know what? But Connecticut would have the opportunity to play football in our league. At least talk about stuff like that, But I can imagine our footprint.
Yeah.
Come on.
Right.
Okay, Jason. What do you think of this idea? The mega conference that is the ACC and the Big East kind of getting together. There's a lot. Obviously, he didn't get into the moving parts of things. It's just more of a pie in the sky idea. But at least in the basketball, I know a lot of people were like, interesting.
So I think it's really easy. I don't want to knock Coach K here, but I think it's really easy to go, oh, wow. Who wouldn't want to see Duke, UNC, other top ACC teams, Clemson and Pitt, teams like that, playing in a conference or playing games against UConn, Marquette, Villanova, and the other top teams, and Creighton, St. John, plenty of good teams in the Big East. It is really easy to look at the top of both of these conferences to go, that would be a really fun, really interesting partnership to have. But I don't know how this necessarily works. I don't know how you structure this partnership, because the Big East has 11 teams. The ACC has 18 teams, 29 teams. There's no way you'd be able to play everybody. Even if you were talking about, like, I could sort of see, I think it'd be kind of interesting to do almost like an ACC Big East challenge kind of thing, that you set up maybe 2, 3, 4 games over the course of the year, and you try to sort of structure, let's have our top teams play each other a little bit more often, and that kind of thing. I think that could be an interesting thing to look at in terms of enhancing schedule strength and made for TV events and all that other kind of stuff. But again, there are 18 teams in the ACC, only 11 in the Big East. It's such a huge thing that I'm with Coach K. Let's talk. Let's see if we can figure something out. Let's see if we can do something that makes some sense for both of us. but in my head, I'm just not seeing exactly how it works. I will say my fantasy would be, I think it'd be awesome if they set up a promotion and relegation, if they set up like, an A league and a B league, um,
Mhm.
between combine all those teams together and like the top, 12 or 14 are in one league and the bottom 12 or 13 or whatever are in another league. And each year you do promotion. I mean, like, I love that structure. I'm not sure it works that great in the current model of college basketball because there are teams that with the transfer portal and all that other kind of stuff, teams rosters change so much year to year that you will accidentally have a team who's supposed to be terrible in the bottom division who are way way better than anybody else there, and you'll have a team that's supposed to be in the top division who's way way worse than they should have been. It becomes more complicated. But again, I'm all for the ACC talking to other conferences and trying to figure something out, make our basketball better, make us more relevant. I kind of like the idea of UConn joining the ACC in football. Their football program showed this year they can be pretty decent, but I, I don't know how all this works yet. And Coach K seemed like he was kind of just throwing something out rather than had a real idea of how the structure would happen.
Yeah, I think structure, like you said, the basketball part of things really it does makes I don't know if it even makes full sense, but it makes a lot of sense for Duke, right? Like to schedule games against the UConns and the Marquettes of the world, and even like the big time events like St. John's in the Garden, like we used to do back in the day. Georgetown here
Yeah,
in
when you're
DC.
talking about the top six teams in each league, you're like, yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, and
that's not
everyone
the
forgets.
reality.
But no, everyone forgets DePaul, right? Like they're like, yeah, we're gonna schedule against all the Big East, not DePaul. Well, Paul's over here. They can play, Boston College or something like that. But I think the structure, yeah, you're right. It's not gonna really work. First of all, UConn never get into the ACC as long as Boston College and Syracuse are there because
Yeah,
of the
exactly.
the fallout from the Big East there, where they tried to block them exiting the Big East. So that's never gonna happen. But I think in the grand scheme of things, this is still a football focused world in college athletics, and so that doesn't make sense revenue wise. How do you split up stuff amongst 29 teams? I don't know. I
Well,
think the
do you know what the Big East payout is? This will be a for folks. This will be a stark difference between the ACC and the Big East.
it's like
I'm
seven and
pretty
a half
sure.
million a year.
Yeah, it's right around $7 million a year. The ACC payout is approaching $40 billion. There is
40 million,
a
yeah.
there is a gulf. There is a massive difference in what the ACC generates and what the Big East generates. And yeah, it's nice that the Big East is better than the ACC in basketball this year, and they are. Period, end of story. They just are, and we can fantasize about how to get Marquette and UConn on the schedule and how that'd be really cool. But this would not be like a merger of equals. That is for damn well sure.
Yeah, especially in the money department, yes. But I do think this is something where maybe Duke is thinking forward in the sense like we remember those rumblings we heard last summer where, Jon Scheyer kind of said, yeah, a home and home with UConn. We'd be open to that. Maybe it's not necessarily a home and home with certain of these teams, but maybe it's like you have an event in the Garden, for example, where you have two ACC teams playing two Big East teams, and you kind of rotate who those teams are every year. And you call like the ACC Big East Showdown. It's not a full challenge where you line up, but like again,
Yeah, but
even with
my question that doesn't move the needle. I mean, Coach K is talking about moving. Coach K is talking about improving the quality of ACC basketball. I don't
right.
see how an event like that changes anything for a conference that has half its teams outside the top 100.
I mean, it helps us because we'll be playing the UConns and the Marquettes of the world. We'll
Yeah,
have
yeah,
those
yeah.
big
But
games.
but Duke
Yeah,
but Duke doesn't have trouble scheduling good opponents. And frankly,
right.
the other top team like UNC doesn't have any trouble with that. I mean, Clemson. No one in the ACC really is going to have too much trouble with that kind of stuff. The question is, how do you make that middle and bottom half of the ACC better? It's that's to me the bigger problem. Well, that and these ACC teams that are in the 30s need to be in the teens. That
Mhm.
would also be better.
I think the idea is the way to get the bottom half of the ACC to lift up is more investment. How do you get more investment? More revenue. How do you get more revenue? Football focused world, baby. That's how we're going back to the more TV revenue and the TV dollars and all that stuff and the spending that comes with it. So yeah, it's a great idea. You guys, again, you can email us dbrpodcast@gmail.com and you can let us know what you think of Coach K's idea. Obviously, the DBR forums, they'll probably be talking about it any second now because it's now out there. But we will end it here on this episode of the Duke Basketball Roundup. Again, thank you again for listening. Jason Evans is there. I'm Donald Wine. Go Duke. It's time for the Duke Band to play us out. Take us home.
You know, it was almost exactly a year ago that we got the diagnosis on Cameron.
Yeah, yeah.
He had a little bit of cancer and stuff, and I was really, they gave him like 6 months. He's like, fuck that. He's still going strong.
He's like, wait, I'm supposed to be sick? No. I'm worried about this heater guy.
Exactly.
Attaboy, Cameron. So I was going through my podcasts yesterday and Friday, just kind of like organizing the ones I listen to and the ones I don't and the ones I need to add. How many podcasts do you have in your like little rotation outside of ours? Like the ones that we do. How many do you have like that you subscribe to?
I subscribe to about 7 or 8 others, and I religiously listen to about 3 or 4 others. There are some of them I subscribe to where I sort of pick and choose the episodes that I'm going to listen to. But I'd say there are about 4 that I listen to without fail. How about you?
Yeah, so I have, and I need to make sure I do this right. I have 53 in my thing, like that I
That's too
subscribe
many.
to.
That's too many.
That's too many. But then I also think about this was so before it was 48. And I was like, I need to cut these down and the ones that I don't really listen to, I'm just gonna weave out. But then there's certain ones that I subscribe to that I don't listen to every episode. I just wait for the ones that are good and I just, mark the rest as played, which is fine. And I have 4 podcasts that I do. So those don't go away.
Right.
So I already
right.
started out with a nice foundation here. And then there's other podcasts that I listen to try and supplement what I'm going to talk about on those, like, Matt Norlander or something like that, or Locked On, right?
Sure.
So I have that. So then I went through and I was like, oh, let me take out the ones I wanted, that I'm not listening to anymore. Let me add some that, I wanted to subscribe and I end up with more. So I don't know how this is going to work.
How do you have this much time?
I don't. That's why I was trying to cut it down. And I've now added more. But the thing is I also do is I just run through like obviously like the daily the news ones. Those are very quick, take like 5 minutes. But I also have like 8 of them.
Hold on. An episode of the daily is usually about 25 or 30 minutes.
No. I'm talking about the day, like not just the daily, but like the news podcast. There are some that are like 8 minutes long. Like up first.
Oh, okay, I gotcha.
It's like 8 minutes long. They just give you the headlines. The New York Times has a headlines one. So I have those, and they all at first were different things. So I was like, oh, let me have all of them because I want to get all the news in about 45 minutes, right? The daily's usually about
baby. They're all the same.
well, now they are because the news cycle is all the same. But when I first started, it was like one was talking about, the Cowboys lost. One was talking about the latest in politics. One was talking about something overseas. And the other was just kind of recapped everything. So I was like, great, 45 minutes, I can get all my news. And it's great. Now it's like, it's like a loop. So I'm like, okay, which one do I get rid of? Which one's the best? They all have the same thing. So I don't know which one to get rid of now. So like now I'm in this trial period in January. We're going to go through and there's going to be, I've kind of grouped them all into different, like categories.
Oh, so you're having like a gladiator tournament.
It's a dance off. Yeah, it's a dance off. Winner stays, loser pays. And so yeah, all my news ones, we're gonna break that down. I got some Detroit ones that I wanted to test out. So I'm like, okay, I'll add those. And then now I have like all the Duke basketball ones that I listen to, all the college basketball, soccer. Like I just have those, and it's gonna be a nice little gauntlet. And the funny thing is all these pods don't know that they're part of something special this month. So I'll tune back. Hopefully we get down to like 30. My goal is to start with less than what I entered 2025 with, which I have failed at so far. So that was my question. So
Yeah, my podcasts are almost exclusively movies, sports,
mhm.
and politics. That's like I kind of don't do anything else. So you can
I
guess
mean,
which ones I listen to after hearing that.
right. I mean, look, I have, like I said, mine, news, Duke, soccer, all the Detroit ones, F1, regular sports, and then life stuff. So yeah, like, and some, again, on some days I don't want to listen to the news, so I just like delete those, right?
Sure.
And then some days I'm like, I'm very fascinated as to what just happened here. I need to listen more 30. So it's a nice little rotation. But yeah, I like every 2 or 3 days a week, I need to catch up on all my podcasts, and that takes all day to catch up on all of them. So yeah, people stop making good podcasts, then I won't. Then I can cut down the number of stuff I have to listen to.
That day ain't coming, my friend. It ain't coming.
Yeah, no, I know.